Okay, so we're going to look at this sugya. We're going to finish off this sugya now. We're excited about this. This will give us a chance to really sum up everything that we've been learning in the first two shiurim, and then be able to once we finish this off, we'll be able to go on to the next sugya. But we'll be able to understand what we've been looking at over the last couple of weeks. So what we're going to do today is we're going to review the questions that we've had the last couple of weeks. We're going to give a svara, give an explanation of this topic, and then we're going to use that svara to answer the questions. Okay. In the end of last week's shiur, what we did was we were able to go through the questions and see the svara, but we didn't answer the questions. So I think it'll be good if we review and then move forward from there. Okay, so let's see. So I review the questions. We're going to say as follows. The first question that we had was without delving into the details of Trumos and Meiser. Okay, the Gemara's problem that we had in the first Gemara that we saw in Brachos that compared Doros Rishonos and Doros Achronos by this Gemara here that we see in source number 1. So our problem with that was that it seems to be saying that there's an issue with getting out of the mitzvah. In other words, by not taking the Trumas and Maasros, that seemed to be an issue, and we weren't sure exactly why what the issue here was. In other words, they're not doing anything wrong. They're following halacha and they're taking the Trumas, the vegetables, the tevel, through a side door, through the back door, and they're not obligated in Trumas and Maasros. Okay, fine. So but what's the issue with that? There's no problem with that. So why does the Gemara seem to be putting it down? Okay, that was our first question. Is really what's the problem? Is there an issue with getting out of a mitzvah? Okay, we saw that the Gemara about Rav Katina. This is the Gemara in Menachos that the angel had said to Rav Katina that by not wearing a garment that has 4 corners on it, so when at that point you're trying to get out of a mitzvah. And when God has his times of anger, again, we don't know what that means for our purposes, but then God will punish you for not doing that mitzvah. And we saw that was odd, because Rav Katina, it says that he never wears tzitzis, right? Never wears tzitzis because never has a garment. We wanted to know what the problem with that was. What's the problem with never wearing tzitzis if you're not wearing a 4-corner garment? Okay, the rush we saw here in source number 3 said that someone that's a Yiras Shamayim won't eat less than a shiur. He won't eat less than the required amount to consume in order to make sure that he can make a bracha achrona. But again, our question was, what's wrong with eating less than a shiur food? Okay, so you don't make a bracha achrona. You might be mesupak, you might be in doubt whether you should make a bracha achrona or not. But what's the problem here? Why is the Yiras Shamayim being told that he should always make sure to eat a shiur of food? Okay. Then we saw Moshe Rabbeinu wanted to come into Eretz Yisrael. The Gemara told us, this is in source number 4 here, because he wanted to do the mitzvos. Okay, so now we wanted to know, right? Moshe didn't want to come in to eat the fruits of Eretz Yisrael. He didn't want to come in to enjoy the beautiful views or anything else that Eretz Yisrael has to offer. The only thing that he was interested in is the mitzvahs that you can only perform when you're in Eretz Yisrael. So that was our question: was what do we, is Moshe's desire to do mitzvahs, which we saw that some of the Rishonim used that to say that should be our attitude towards mitzvahs. We should always be looking to achieve more and fulfill more mitzvahs. Is that something that's instructive for us? Is Moshe Rabbeinu's attitude that of always trying to do mitzvahs, is that in a halachic sense? Obviously, in a philosophical sense, we should always be trying to do mitzvahs. Is that something instructive for us? We wanted to know. We saw the Rambam held that it was the Uri held. Excuse me. The Rambam held that that's mutter, right? But the Uri held that it was usher to try to get out of having to give Trumos and Maasros on your tevel by bringing it in through the side door. The Uri called that usher. So we wanted to know what the nature of that prohibition is, and does that extend to the rest of the Torah? Are we now going to say that the Uri holds, at least, that anybody that tries to get out of doing a mitzvah by not being obligated in the mitzvah is also violating some sort of isser. And what is that isser? What is that? So that was, we want to know, this source number 5 in Uri. The Rambam maintained, as we know, that it was permissible to get out of Trumas and Maasros, right? This is source number 6. The Rambam says it's mutter l'harim al tefua, right? So it's mutter to do that. So our question was, according to the Rambam, now he disagrees with the Uri, or the Uri disagrees with the Rambam, and now the question is, okay, what's there? How do we understand the debate between them? Why does Uri hold that it's usher to do this, and the Rambam holds that it is mutter? And then the Rambam, we see, so this is in source number 7. The Rambam says that it's also isaso pachos mikashir kidei with potra minachala, that the Rambam held that it was forbidden to make a challah pachos mikashir, like less than the shear, so that you don't have to give challah, meaning that it's usher to try to get out of the mitzvah of challah. And the Rambam had just said that it's mutter to try to get out of the mitzvah of trumas and maasros. So why is he taking the opposite approach when it comes to challah, that he holds like the Uri, it's usher to get out of a mitzvah? So our question, is the Rambam contradicting himself here? How do we understand the Rambam fully? Okay. Then we saw the Rush, and the Rush wrote that a person should learn from Moshe and try to fulfill as many mitzvahs as possible. Okay, so, and especially in tzitzis, which reminds us of all the mitzvahs. So in tzitzis, we should definitely be trying to accomplish. So is this now with the Rush? Is he using this now Moshe Rabbeinu's lesson as a halacha? That was our question before. If this was just a Musar lesson, but now it seems to be that this is saying that no, this is something that we have to go ahead and do. And the Moshe Rabbeinu is not just a nice Musar lesson, but it's instructive to us and obligatory for us to do. Okay, now Rabbi Yonah wrote in the same way now that it is obligatory to go out and make sure that you're wearing a beged with 4 corners. That's an actual obligation now. Says the Uri. Says Rabbi Yonah, that a person, if he does not have tzitzis on his clothing because his garments are, let's say, don't have 4 corners, he has to go out and buy a special garment. A lot of us do that today, but says Rabbi Yonah, that's obligatory. Okay, and then we wanted to know, now that the Rush holds it's not obligatory, Rabbi Yonah holds that it is obligatory to go out and buy tzitzis. Is there an obligation to go ahead and pay and buy a special garment of tzitzis? So those are our questions. Now let's give an explanation. Let's give a svara. We use the svara to give an explanation to answer our questions. Okay, so we wanted to know as follows. This is when the Rambam, when the Gemara wrote that you can be punished at certain times for not fulfilling a mitzvah assay, right? It wasn't referring. Now remember, we had our different categories. Okay, we had. Let's review our categories, because if we don't review our categories of mitzvahs, this is going to be incredibly confusing. Okay, so the first category that we had are things that you're obligated in. Lulav is a mitzvah that you're obligated in. Tefillin, mitzvah that you're obligated in. These are things. It doesn't make a difference where you are. It doesn't matter what time it is in terms of the calendar year. These are things that you are obligated to do. Okay, there's no question about it. Then there are mitzvos that are kavua. Okay, that this is I think the Shita Mukabetzes is a point. There are mitzvos that are kavua like sukkah, which means that even though you could technically be exempt from sukkah at any given moment, because you could say, well, I right now I'm exempt from sukkah because I'm with a groom and I'm helping him out, or I'm doing a different mitzvah, right? But it's since the mitzvah is kavua that you have to do the mitzvah at a certain time, so then you are obligated. Okay, even if you don't own a sukkah, then you have to go out and buy a sukkah. You must do that mitzvah. Then we saw the third category, our mitzvahs called reshus, which is that a person is only obligated in them with certain situations and certain circumstances. So it's only if I have let's say a house, I have to put on a mezuzah. Okay, but it's only if I have a house. If I have a garment with 4 corners, then I must put on tzitzis. But if I don't have the garment, if I don't have the house, it would seem like I don't have to do these things. Okay, so that's those are mitzvahs, so they're rishus. And then you have what's called a mitzvah kiyumis. Okay, a mitzvah kiyumis is where there's absolutely no obligation. Okay, there's no obligation to do the mitzvah, but if he does fulfill a mitzvah, he's mekayim a mitzvah. Okay, so there's no circumstances where he'd be obligated. The example that I give for this, pure mitzvah kiyumis, is a man marrying a second wife. A man, when he's already married, a man marrying a second wife, he has no obligation to marry a second wife. There's never going to be a time he has to marry a second wife. And therefore, if he does marry a second wife, he fulfills, at least according to the Rambam, the mitzvah of Kiddushin, and therefore he's allowed to, therefore he fulfills the mitzvah, but he's not obligated. Okay, so those are our 4 categories. Okay, so now knowing that those are our 4 categories of mitzvahs. Okay, so let's now understand what we're talking about here in our sugya. Okay, when the Gemara wrote that you can be punished at certain times for not fulfilling a mitzvah's assay, it obviously wasn't referring to the obligatory mitzvahs, that first category like lulav, because it's clear if you don't do it, then you're going to be punished because you're obligated to do it. It can't be referring to the second category, okay, which is a mitzvah's assay kavua, okay, which means that it's a mitzvah's assay that you are obligated at certain points of time, like sukkah, and it can't be referring to the 4th category of a mitzvah kiyumis because you never have an obligation, so you would never be punished for it. So the only case that our Gemara could be referring to when it says that if you try to get out of a mitzvah like tzitzis when you're not obligated, okay, it must be referring to a mitzvah aseh that the Rambam calls a rishus, which means you're obligated to do it at certain times. At certain times, you'd be obligated to do it. So, for instance, right, like we said, mezuzah. I'm never obligated. I could live my whole life on a boat. I could live my whole life in a tent, and I would never have to put up a mezuzah. And when I got up to Shemayim, the Kodesh Baruch Hu would never say, "Hey, where's your mezuzahs?" Right? Because since I never had a home, I was never obligated to do mitzvah. So that's our question now. When a person does a person have to put themselves into a situation? Do they have to buy a home? Do they have to buy a garment with 4 corners? Do they have to go ahead and do something that would then obligate them to have to fulfill a mitzvah? Okay, so those are our 4 categories, and now we understand we've limited it to 1 category, which is category of rishus. But now let's limit it to let's expand that 3rd category of rishus, and let's expand it now to another category, to 2 more categories. Okay, so within rishus, we're going to have 2 more categories, and they are as follows: shiurim, which are measurements, and tanoim, which are conditions. Okay, now that means as follows: that there's an amount or a condition that must be met to obligate a person in the mitzvah. Okay, so examples of shiurim are how much flour has to be used for challah, and examples of tanoim are fruits that have, in order to be chayav in shumas and maasros, they have to be brought in through the front door. So that's situations. Those are shiurim, amounts, and tanoim are conditions. Okay, so those are 2 subcategories within rishus. Okay, now there's a difference between shiurim and tanoim. This is really where our svara takes place. Okay, so when it comes to shiurim, the person's already shayach, they're already associated with the mitzvah. Okay, what do I mean by that? He's already making challah. Okay, so he's already involved in the mitzvah. Okay, so now there just has to be a proper amount needed to fulfill the mitzvah. So the Rambam says once you're already connected to the mitzvah, once you're already shayach to the mitzvah, so then you are obligated, 100% obligated, and it will be forbidden to not do enough and not use a proper amount or a sufficient amount with the intention of trying to get out of the mitzvah. Okay, and that's the Rambam's language. The Rambam's language was pachos mikashir, right? A little bit at a time, in order to lefator that's right. What does he say? He says this is source number Number 7. Also, pachos mikashir kidei lepotra minachal, right? So that he does a little at a time in order to exempt himself. That's forbidden. Why? Because he's already shaykh to the mitzvah. He's already doing the mitzvah. But that's different than the situation of Tanaim, of conditions. When you lack a condition, like you bring it through the front door, right? So you're not bringing it through the front door, so you're lacking condition. So he's not shaykh to the mitzvah at all. Therefore, the Rambam maintained it would be permissible for him to try to not fulfill the mitzvah by bringing it around the back door. It's not a stira, it's not a contradiction in the Rambam. The Rambam is talking about when it comes to a case where your situation is based on not having a shiur that's enough, you're already shaykh to the mitzvah, you're already doing everything that needs to be done, you're just making it a little less so you're not obligated. So then, in that case, you are obligated to, and it's usher to try to get out of it. But when it comes to meeting a condition, so like bringing fruits to the front door, he's not shaykh to the mitzvah at all. Okay. With that svara, we can answer our questions. Okay. So our first question was, we didn't want to delve into the details of Trumas and Mitzvos. The Gemara seems to be saying that there's a problem getting out of mitzvos. So is getting out of a mitzvah problem? So on a halachic level, there seems to be a machlokes if there's an issue of getting out of a mitzvah. Okay. So, but look at this Beis Halevi. This is this Beis Halevi here. He says, so this Beis Halevi says that let's get it here. It's source number 20. Gedeli pater min mitzvah hari mara b'atzmo she'ena chafetz b'mitzvah ve'ubekiyuma v'im kain hu begeder chote umoes b'mitzvah. So he's like a sinner, says the Beis Halevi, if he's trying to get out of mitzvahs. Okay, so it seems to be that Beis Halevi is speaking philosophically, but he calls the person a chote. And the reason why the person is a chote and why this is halachic is because once you're shaykh to the mitzvah, once you're already involved in the mitzvah, it would be usher to try to get around it. Okay, that's the idea. So and that's why we asked our second question of what's the Gemara talking about when it says that you're punished at certain times. So now we know that that's referring to a mitzvah say that's a reshus. Okay, the question is whether a person has to put themselves into that situation in the first place. Okay, what's wrong with eating less than a shiur? Okay, now we understand because we put this into the halacha that shiurim are, you're still shaykh to the mitzvah. We now understand why the Rosh was makbid to say that he has to go ahead and eat enough to make a bracha achrona because he's already shaykh to the bracha achrona. Okay, and now Moshe wanting to fulfill the mitzvos, he's instructed sort of in a philosophical sense, but not in a halachic sense. Okay, our next question was, what's the nature of this, the Meiri's prohibition of getting out of Trumas and Maestros? Okay, and does that now extend to the rest of the Torah? So there's a problem philosophically, right? But and that's why the Meiri says that this is usher, because it reflects itself in the halacha, right? Which is why this philosophical problem becomes a halachic isser. It does reflect itself in a halachic sense, because once you're now shaykh somewhat to the mitzvah, so according to Meiri, then you'd be obligated to do it. Okay. What's the debate about between the Meiri and the Rambam about whether you have to bring Trumas and Maestros through the window, whether that's asur? So the Meiri doesn't make our differentiation between situations of shiurim and tanaim. He holds it's all like tanaim. It's all like shiurim. It's all asur. Okay. By the way, the Derech Hamuna here in source number 21, this is Rabbi Kanievsky, say he looked at the Meiri differently and said when the Meiri says it's asur, it doesn't mean asur mamish. Okay, I'm not sure how he knows that, but that's what he says. He says it's just a ganai. Ganai would be more of a shkafic issue. Okay. Now we understand the Rambam's problem, why he says it's usher to make less than a shiur of challah, right? Because when it comes to making less than a shiur of challah, so then the person's already shaykh to the mitzvah. All he lacks is the proper amount of flour and then eventually dough needed to fulfill the mitzvah. So the Rambam maintained that it would be forbidden for him to try to not fulfill the mitzvah. Okay, he's already shaykh to it. Okay, so then, okay, now we know why there's no contradiction in the Rambam, right? It would only be a contradiction in the Rambam if you had a situation where it's forbidden for the Rambam the Rambam would hold it's forbidden when it comes to Shiur, and that's why Chali holds it's forbidden. He holds it's mutter when it comes to a situation of Tanaim, of conditions, right? That's the difference, okay? Okay, so that's, okay. Now, when the Rush wrote that a person should learn from Moshe, and this is more of a shkafic lesson, okay? And Rabbeinu Yonah holds that a person actually is obligated to buy a new garment. Okay, now what's interesting, by the way, just I want to bring up one last thing. This Tosas Arid here, it's a fascinating Tosas Arid. He says, "V'chi nechshedu chaverim lafkia tuasa miyad meiser, nearly the tari shein kavanasan lito meisers el kadesh lo yavo behem lidei tefal." Says the Tosas Arid, there are times where a person tries to get out of a mitzvah for a different reason. He's not trying to get out of the mitzvah just to get out of the mitzvah. Rather, what he's doing is he's afraid that he's going to make a mistake when doing the mitzvah. And therefore, he tries to get out of the situation that would obligate him in the mitzvah in order that he not do the mitzvah improperly. Meaning that in the Tosas Arid, and we see this reflected in a lot of different places, that a lot of people have these practices. It's better to completely get away, not do the mitzvah, than to do the mitzvah improperly. And therefore, in a chance I have not to do the mitzvah, it's best that I just completely not do the mitzvah instead of doing it improperly. And that would be a different look at our Gemara. Okay, we're going to stop here. Hope you enjoy the 3 parts of this year, and we'll be on next week with a different